Well, there is no rest for those of us working in the AI industry or just watching AI because just a few days ago, XAI announced a $6 billion Series C round of fundraising, which puts them above $12 billion now in total. And so I figured, you know, a few weeks ago, we did a post that was about, what is the fundraising landscape in the video AI space. And now that XAI has released this news, it's worth kind of digging deeper into what does all this mean and how do we all compare everybody's money and how does it all kind of shake out in terms of everybody that's playing in America, maybe a little bit in Europe, and then of course China, the big looming threat of, has been rumored to be the future king of AI, although it's very unclear, right? Especially with all this money going into AI from the American private sector. So we're going to jump in. We're going to look at this XAI Series C. We're going to look at all these different things. So stick with me and we'll walk through as much as we can. We'll be as thorough as we can and look at what does all this fundraising mean and think about, at least it gives us some context as to where this is all going. So here's the XAI Series C. Investors that participate are A16Z, BlackRock, Fidelity, Kingdom Holdings, Lightspeed, MGX, Morgan Stanley, OIA, QIA, I don't know who these are, Sequoia Capital, of course, VOI Capital, NVIDIA even, AMD, and among others. The announcement kind of goes deeper into, this is a Series C funding, A16Z, of course, which is always in the mix, and strategic investors of NVIDIA and AMD, which is pretty interesting. And announcement of the Series B in May 2024 had made significant technological progress and shipped a multitude of key initiatives, including Colossus. XAI established a decisive hardware advantage with the world's largest AI supercomputer using an NVIDIA full-stack reference design with 100,000 NVIDIA Hopper GPUs compared to typical multi-year industry timeframes. Colossus was fully operational in 122 days and started running workloads just 19 days after the first servers were delivered. Soon, XAI will double the size of Colossus to a combined 200,000 NVIDIA Hopper GPUs achieved by using the NVIDIA Spectrum X Ethernet networking platform. So, big deal. They shipped their Grok 2, which is now deep inside of X. They have an API giving developers programmatic access. They got Aurora, XAI's proprietary autoregressive image generation. Interesting because I thought they were using Flux, so I guess they have their own now. And then Grok on X leveraging the X platform, which is interesting because when you go on X now, you see like little Grok thing and then it'll like explain a post. So that's pretty cool. In my opinion, kind of one of the more elegant ways to ship an AI into like a existing experience. It doesn't always show up, as you can see here. Like I think maybe there's some kind of opt-in or something like that, but I do see it on posts like this one where you can click in and you can kind of find out more and you can tell me more about the other companies that have raised money to compete with XAI. So it might even get some of the research that I did. So here's some information. OpenAI, which raised 6.6, an evaluation. Anthropic. See, there you go. Boom. Got a lot. Oh, didn't quite get it right. Valuation pushing 5 billion. Okay. Then Cohere, etc. So it's not quite grabbing all the right information, but still kind of an interesting and elegant way to put things in there, as well as even grabbing out web pages that are related to that initial announcement there. So pretty cool, I have to say. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But what does this all mean? How much money is this actually, right? So Crunchbase, great resource. It does have the information here across 4 rounds. So we had this corporate round, which probably came money from Twitter maybe, then a venture round. It's unclear who was investing there. It says Roman Smolevsky. All right, interesting. So kind of an independent investor. And then we've got, a Series B, which definitely has a lot more investors. That's $6 billion. So that puts them at a total of $12.4 billion, which is quite a lot. Now, how do we think about this in context of the main competitors? So there's Anthropic, which arguably is the number 2 player. They've raised $13.7 billion across quite a longer stretch of time, I have to say. So earlier than 2022. So unfortunately, I don't have the paid version of this, but of Crunchbase. But as you can see, they took a lot of different rounds along the way, and have raised a total of 13.7 versus XAI's 12.4. And then OpenAI has raised a total of $21.9 billion across a lot longer period of time, all the way back to 2016 when Elon was still involved. So we got a stretch all the way almost 10 years of fundraising that amounts to $21.9 billion, of which the most of it is here. And we have that debt financing of $4 billion. So in toto, OpenAI as a private company has probably raised the most of any private company, which does give it a huge advantage. It's got a lot of GPUs. It's got a nice, edge in terms of research. It has arguably a bigger product out there. And yeah, so that's kind of interesting from that perspective. Then there's other smaller players in the market, Cohere being one of them. Cohere has raised $1.1 billion. Now, Cohere is more, I feel like, more targeted towards enterprise and research, although that kind of puts it in the camp with Anthropic, which has raised 13.7. So Cohere maybe is dealing with a different kind of customer base. So that's pretty interesting. Mistral, which we haven't heard about for a while, I have to say, is that European company or a French company, which has raised 1.1 billion pounds, which the pound is close to the dollar these days. So that might be, maybe 1.2 or 1.3 billion dollars. So that's pretty interesting. Maybe it's 1.5, I don't know. So that is the amount that they've raised. Again, minuscule now relative to these competitors. Now, before this latest round, XAI was not in the double-digit bill, right? So now it enters this kind of vaunted space of Anthropic, OpenAI, and XAI as the kind of the three main competitors, which have raised double-digit billions. Then, of course, I would be remiss to not mention Meta and DeepMind, right? And of course, I'm omitting Microsoft because maybe Microsoft's main compute and research, etc., is lodged within ChatGPT. There's Meta, right? And how much money is Meta going to spend? So now we're going to change kind of the conversation versus how much they have raised, which will be how much they plan to spend over a long period of time. Plus the fact that, of course, OpenAI and others are making a lot of money over the course of time. I think OpenAI has been making like anywhere from $2 to $5 billion a year annually. So, it's also supplementing this cost here. Nevertheless, that's just a measure of how much they've raised. We're not going to understand how much Meta and Google have raised, but we do have a sense of how much they are willing to spend. So, as Mark Zuckerberg says, going into the year, we had a range for what we thought we could potentially do, and we've been able to do more than we've kind of hoped and expected at the beginning of the year. And don't forget, Zuck has spent a lot of money acquiring GPUs just to keep up with the Instagram recommendation algorithm, the Facebook recommendation algorithm, and things like that, video, etc. And so that's almost like a sunk cost that we are not computing for here. But it says here, Meta raised the low end of its capital expenditures guidance for 2024 to 38 billion from 37 billion. To the top end is still 40 billion. It's actually something that I'm quite happy that the team is executing well on. That execution makes me somewhat more optimistic that we're going to be able to keep on building this out at a good pace. So that means that here, Meta added that the expenditures, which include the purchase of billions of dollars worth of NVIDIA's GPUs, will grow significantly in 2025. So he's set to spend, 30 to 40 billion dollars, of which a majority or a major chunk of it is for actual GPUs. So that's pretty interesting. So that's maybe a slight measure of how much money, maybe it's half or a third of that money is going into AI specifically, or maybe a majority of it, who knows. So, but that does give us a sense up against, XAI's 12, Anthropic's 13, OpenAI's 21. Then we got DeepMind, the chief of Google's AI business. This is Demis Hassabis, who is a legend in the space, said that over time, the company will spend more than 100 billion developing AI technology. So I don't know what that includes, right? So he did co-found DeepMind in 2010 before it was acquired by Google a decade ago, right? So that's about 2014. So DeepMind was acquired then. So let's say that since 2014 into who knows when, Google will have spent 100 billion. So I don't know where they are on that path right now. But he says that's one of the reasons we teamed up with Google back in 2014 is we knew that in order to get to AGI, we need a lot of compute. He continued referring to AGI, a debated threshold that can mean machines which can perform better than humans on a wide array of tasks. That's what's transpired, and Google has and still has the most computers. So they have TPUs, and they've also bought GPUs as well from NVIDIA. They make their own. So I think Google is a major player willing to spend $100 billion. And this is what he said in April. So this is still playing out. those are the major players here. So we've got one corporate which is claiming to be able to spend 100 billion on this problem. Another one spending near 40. Then we've got people who've raised 1 bill, 1 bill, 21 bill, 13 bill, and a recent 12 bill in total. So that gives you a sense of the American and one European player in particular. I'm not sure if there are other major European players of this size that are willing to spend that kind of money on AI, which means that this truly is the domain of American companies, which, given that if you believe the hype, right, that this is the future, that AI is a major component of the future of technology, future of economy, it's going to change the world. This is something, of course, that American companies are taking full tilt, right? So what about China, right? China, obviously, big company, but big country, not as big as America in terms of, its influence over the globe, as well as technological influence as well. But at the same time, some people will compare China GDP to via PPP, purchasing power parity, and some would argue that China's economy is bigger than the U.S. now, has surpassed. But nevertheless, how much money now is going into AI? So China's investment in AI expected to reach $38.1 billion in 2027. This is from China Daily. This is a Chinese newspaper. So China's investment in artificial intelligence is forecast to reach $38.1 billion in 2027, accounting for 9% of the world's total. Now, this is what confuses me about this article, which is that I'm not sure if this is like Chinese, like, is this the CCP? Is this the Chinese government? Or is this like private money in China? The report writes, in recent years, China has continued to lift its capability in AI, artificial industries, blah, blah, blah. AI hardware will remain the most important destination market for market investment over the 5-year forecast period, accounting for over 60% of investments in the country's AI market. But the investment proportion will shrink regularly, and the annual investment growth will slow down over the 5-year forecast period. Surprising to me, given that it's so competitive. Now, this article was written in last year, so I mean, this year has been a big year for AI, so maybe this is not accounting for that. The AI software market is deemed to have greater potential. Investment growth will be number one among AI technological markets. The investment in AI software is expected to reach nearly $10 billion, accounting for about 25% of China's total, up nearly 6 percentage points of that in 2022. So that's referring to 2023. So this 38.1 billion might be a very low estimate. And of course, as we know, it's hard to get good information about AI or about China in general, and let alone AI in China. Now, here's a better article. This is from October 7th, 2024. It's from the Chamber of Commerce of China. So in the first half of 2024, Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu, sometimes referred to as BAT, like B-A-T. These are the dominant players in China. Now, it's also worth, before we dig into this one in particular, because we do know that some of these companies, like Google, is a multi-trillion-dollar company. So is Meta. OpenAI is funded by Microsoft, which is also a multi-trillion-dollar company. Anthropic is also funded by Amazon, which I think is also a trillion-dollar company. So these are trillion-dollar companies are in this space in America in a big way, right? Where's BAT? So Baidu, its revenue was 4.78 billion, a 3% decrease year over year. So, China's having a moment, right? And it's unclear to me what the valuation of Baidu is. Let's check on the valuation here. Baidu valuation. Okay, here we go. So the market cap is 30.87 billion. So that's tiny relative to Google, right? And then Tencent, the revenue is $86.16 billion. So that's a very big. Their profits are 24.2 billion. So a lot of money to spend. And let's see here. The valuation is over $1 trillion. Okay. Oops. Here. Market cap of 493.91. So, not that high. Oh, it did approach 1 trillion before it plummeted, I see. So we have a current market valuation of $492 billion. Nothing to laugh home about. It's still a huge, huge company. And then lastly, Alibaba, whose revenue was over 137 billion, which is a crazy, crazy number. But of course, this is e-commerce, so margins are a little lower. Their market cap is $203 billion, right? According to markets right now. So that gives you a sense of how large they are. They're not huge, right? But of course, the CCP, the Chinese government, is huge and is willing to spend a lot of money on these problems, especially if with respect to their interest in the market, right? And so like AI being an industry that is very vital to, China's place in, technological competition or dominance in the world. So it makes sense that we might see that these numbers don't reflect what is about to come. So nevertheless, BAT, so these companies which amount to less than $1 trillion in total, but maybe at one point did amount to more than $1 trillion, had a combined expenditure of $7 billion in the first half of 2024. So maybe the second half of 2024 might also have a total of 14 billion in total. So that's quite a lot relative to what we're seeing in these companies here, but nevertheless not as much in total. And then we get down to here and we see that according to a report by Reuters, Alibaba has outlined an ambitious plan to invest approximately 15 billion in AI initiatives, which is a big number. We also have a Chinese AI startup called Moonshot, which is in discussions with investors to secure an additional funding, which would increase its valuation to 3 billion and up by 500 million from the funding in February. So if its valuation is 3 billion, it is not raising probably more than a billion. It's probably raising another, 500 or 700 billion or million dollars. So that's a big caveat there. So then we get digging into like kind of how large that is. So according to Grandview Research, the global AI market size was 62.35 billion in 2020 and expected to expand to 4.2% from 2021 to 2028, reaching approximately almost $1 trillion by 2028. So that makes sense to me. So anyway, that's China. This is other information about kind of the landscape, but that's China and that's the money moving into China. There's also a few other companies worth mentioning. There's Alibaba's Qwen. This is their 72 billion parameter model. It's the king and Chinese models are dominating. So this has been listed a few times in major benchmarks. But it's unclear, how much money is being spent to create this. Alibaba claims that Qwen has over 2.2 million corporate users, so that's a lot, and signals enterprise AI usage. Now, what does that actually mean? Again, money and numbers coming out of China is always kind of suspect, and it's kind of unclear, right? Then we've got Tencent is latest Chinese tech giant to enter the LLM price war. Now, this is about like them kind of slashing prices more or less. The pro version of Hunyuan will have a 70% price cut for input while they're keeping the same charge for output, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of interesting that, I don't know much about this, but clearly it's competitive such that they would be slashing prices. But maybe it's also because it's unclear that this market is established. Now, this is earlier this year. So it's unclear to me to what extent is this stuff useful to the local Chinese market. And then, of course, there's O1.ai, which is looking to raise 200 million last year. So they probably did raise this. They were at a valuation of above $1 billion. This is from the famous writer Kai-Fu Lee. And so, like, this is a company that has at some points hit a benchmark. So they've sometimes ranked fairly highly in Hugging Face benchmarks, but still not even in the top 5, I would say, right? Like, I think even XAI is in the top 5 or top 10 at least these days. So like definitely ChatGPT and Anthropic are neck and neck. And then you've also got Google Gemini in there as well. So those I would say are the top 3 players in LLM, and everybody else is like, top 10 and lower, right? And so where are these models? Where are the Chinese models in this space? And who knows, maybe they'll leapfrog. But clearly, like, as we can see, the money entering this space is insane, right? Like XAI, Anthropic, and OpenAI combined, that accounts for almost $50 billion entering into, American, specifically LLM competitors. And so what does this all mean? Who knows? I do think that long term, I am more bullish on American prospects in LLM. I do think that given what we're seeing though in the video AI space, that clearly, the Chinese competitors do not sleep, right? Hailua and Kling are easily within the top 5 of the best video AI competitors right now. So what is preventing the LLM AI competitors in China catching up to the American ones? I mean, definitely money clearly is a major component, but, and also there's this chips dilemma where, Biden has, blocked chip manufacturing and selling to Chinese companies and competitors. At the same time, like what long term is stopping them in other ways, right? They might have a lot more data. They might have a lot more people to annotate their data, et cetera, et cetera. So there's other issues as well. So I'm not sure how competitive China will get, but clearly, at least I think that China is going to have to activate a lot more money to make that happen. I mean, if it's competing against $40 billion total raised across, 3 companies alone, not including Meta and Google, which could amount to another $150 billion on top. So let's say there's like almost $200 billion funneling into LLM competition or general AI competition from American companies. Does China even come close to that level of investment? Not sure. And of course, Europe is arguably in the dust on this one, unless somehow the open source community has some kind of advantage that we don't know about. But I think ultimately, data, GPUs, researchers, and compute and energy are really the limiting factors. And if you don't have the money to buy the compute and buy the energy, then how are you going to compete in this space? So I'm very curious how that all plays out. I mean, there's definitely also long-term prospects of how all this shapes out, right? Like long-term, maybe America isn't an energy competitor, right? And maybe it can't compete on that level. So we'll see where that goes. But anyway, that gives you a sense of all the money that's funneling into the space right now. It's really interesting, and it gives us kind of a sense of who's going to win, or at least who's going to stay competitive, at least for the next few years. So, all right, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and see you in the next one.